The forest was unnervingly quiet. Too quiet for men trained in war. Every footstep, every breath, amplified in the frozen air. The kind of silence that makes a soldier grip his weapon tighter, makes the heart pound against the ribs like a hammer. It was late January 1945, along the Colmar Pocket in eastern France. Winter had turned the battlefield into a frozen wasteland. American forces had pushed deep into German-held territory. Exhausted men, stretched dangerously thin across miles of frozen woodland, were waiting. They had seen the enemy retreat before, watched them fall back through burning villages and shattered forests. But no one believed the danger was over. The veterans knew better. A cornered enemy is the most dangerous kind. Then the Germans emerged. Infantry poured out of the shadows, precise, disciplined, moving like predators through the snow-dusted trees. These were not broken men. These were professional soldiers, veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived the hell of Russia. Behind them, the mechanical growl of tanks shattered the fragile calm, heavy tracks ripping through frozen ground, hurling ice and debris in every direction. Artillery screamed overhead, shells tearing earth and splintering ancient trees like matchsticks. The American position stood directly in their path. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. 40 men. Exhausted from weeks of continuous combat. Frozen to the bone. Some were seasoned veterans who had fought from North Africa to France. Others were replacements, fresh from training, who had never heard a shot fired in anger. Outnumbered 6-1. Outgunned. Surrounded on three sides. By every measure of military logic, by every tactical calculation, they should have been wiped out in minutes. And yet, the German advance faltered. Machine gun fire erupted from a burning M10 tank destroyer, each burst precise and lethal. Artillery landed with unnerving accuracy, dropping exactly where it was needed. Confused reports moved up the German chain of command. Heavy resistance. Fortified positions. Multiple American units dug in deep. Battalion strength, at least. Reinforcements were urgently requested. All of it was wrong. When the smoke finally cleared and the battlefield fell silent, there were no battalions, no hidden defensive lines, no reserves waiting in the woods, only one soldier, wounded. Standing atop a burning tank destroyer, flames licking dangerously at his boots, his hands still gripping the .50 caliber machine gun as empty brass casings spilled endlessly into the blood-stained snow below. His name was Audie Murphy. January 26th, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. A small farming village that most Americans had never heard of. A place that would become legend. The snow that morning masked everything. Craters from previous bombardments. Buried mines waiting for a careless step. The frozen bodies of soldiers already lost in earlier engagements. The cold was not just uncomfortable. It was the kind of cold that kills. The kind that seeped into muscle and bone, making every movement agonizing. Fingers went numb inside gloves. Toes lost feeling inside boots. Fear hung thick in the air, invisible but undeniable. You could feel it in your chest, taste it on your tongue like copper. German forces in this sector were battered from weeks of fighting, retreating slowly but far from broken. Desperate. Cornered. The kind of enemy willing to die rather than surrender another inch of ground. And standing in their way was Audie Murphy. He was barely 5'5", weighing less than 150 pounds soaking wet. He did not look like a soldier, let alone a warrior. His face was soft, almost boyish, with features that made him look even younger than his 20 years. That Texas drawl made him sound like a farm boy, which he was. Men twice his size had underestimated him from the moment they met him. Officers doubted his capacity to even carry a full pack. Sergeants wondered if he could handle the rigors of combat. Every single one of them was wrong. Audie Leon Murphy was born June 20th, 1925 in Kingston, Texas, a tiny town that barely appeared on maps. He was one of 12 children born to sharecroppers who never owned a single acre of the land they worked their entire lives. His family lived in poverty that most Americans could not imagine. No running water, no electricity. Meals that consisted of whatever could be hunted, grown, or bartered. His father abandoned the family when Audie was young. One day he was there, the next he was gone. Left a woman alone with 12 mouths to feed. His mother died of illness when Audie was just 16 years old. The family had no money for proper medical care. She wasted away while her children watched helplessly. Overnight, the boy became the man. Responsible for his younger siblings. Responsible for putting food on the table. Responsible for survival itself. He learned to hunt not for sport or recreation, but out of sheer necessity. Every bullet fired had real meaning. The difference between his family eating or going hungry. By age 12, he could drop a squirrel at 100 yards with a borrowed .22 rifle. One shot, one kill. There were no second chances when ammunition was precious. By 15, he could track wounded deer through the thickest Texas woods, reading signs that most grown men would miss. A broken twig, a trace of blood, the pattern of disturbed leaves. By 17, he was training for a war he did not yet know would come to define his entire existence. Those early years forged something in him, something that could not be taught in any military academy. An ability to remain calm under impossible pressure, to focus when others panicked, to make life or death decisions in split seconds. Skills that seemed designed for war, though he had learned them just trying to keep his family alive. When America entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, Murphy tried to enlist immediately. He was 17, underweight, technically underage, but determined to serve. Determined to make something of himself. The Marines rejected him outright. Too small, they said. Not Marine material. The paratroopers turned him away. Too light for the equipment, they claimed. The parachute would never support his weight properly. The Navy refused him. Could not swim well enough, they said. Would be a liability on a ship. Only the Army finally accepted him in June 1942. And only because they desperately needed men. Any men who could hold a rifle. Standards were lowered, physical requirements relaxed. The war was eating soldiers faster than they could be trained. He was 18 years old, had never left Texas, never seen the ocean, never traveled more than 50 miles from the farm where he was born, never imagined what was coming. Murphy shipped out to North Africa in early 1943. Weeks at sea on a crowded transport ship, surrounded by terrified seasick soldiers who had no idea what combat really meant. Men who thought war would be like the movies. Glorious, heroic, clean. He stayed quiet during the voyage, watched, listened, learned. He observed the veterans, the few men who had seen combat in the Pacific or early European campaigns, studied how they moved, how they talked, how they carried themselves. Sicily came in July 1943. Operation Husky. The Allied invasion of Europe through Italy's back door. The landing beaches turned into absolute slaughter. Men died before their boots even touched the sand. Cut down by German machine guns positioned perfectly on the high ground, bodies floating in the surf, blood turning the Mediterranean red, screams drowned out by artillery fire. Murphy's unit pushed inland through that chaos. Bullets everywhere, snapping past heads, kicking up dirt. Smoke so thick you could not see 10 feet ahead. Fire erupting from buildings, from vehicles, from the earth itself. Most soldiers, even trained soldiers, froze in their first real combat. The human mind is not designed for such violence. Murphy went cold. Focused, calculated, efficient. Every target identified before firing, every threat neutralized methodically. No wasted movement, no panic, no hesitation. He was a hunter in a new kind of forest, and every instinct from those hungry Texas years came flooding back. Palermo, his first confirmed kills. There was no emotion, no satisfaction, no joy. Only precision and the grim understanding that hesitation meant death. Yours or your buddies. Then came Salerno in September. The Allied landing on mainland Italy, German defenders fought with ferocious determination. Every house was a fortress, every street a killing ground. Murphy's squad took casualties. Men he had trained with, eaten with, shared cigarettes with, gone in an instant. Anzio followed in January 1944. The bloodiest, most brutal campaign Murphy had yet experienced. Months of stalemate in the mud. German artillery zeroed in on American positions. Shells falling day and night. No place was safe. Sleep became impossible. Food was cold rations eaten in flooded foxholes. Men broke mentally before they broke physically. Murphy endured. The invasion of southern France came in August 1944. Operation Dragoon. Another beach, another slaughter, another push inland. Each campaign, each battle added more medals to his chest, more promotions to his rank, and more losses to his soul. Friends dying in his arms. Boys from small towns across America. Names he would never forget. Faces that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Promises made to remember them. To make sure someone did. To tell their families they died brave. By January 1945, Audie Murphy had survived nearly 2 full years of continuous frontline combat. 7 major campaigns. Wounded twice by shrapnel. Lucky to be alive both times. Survived a bout of malaria that sent him to the hospital. Delirious with fever. Watched countless comrades. Men he had laughed with, fought beside, shared his last cigarette with, get erased from existence in an instant. Sniper rounds that came from nowhere. Artillery that fell without warning. Mines that killed randomly, cruelly. Random, senseless, final. He was exhausted beyond what sleep could fix. Every step forward was a battle with his own body and mind, fighting against the weight of everything he had seen and done. And yet, when Company B moved into position at Holtzwihr, he was still standing, still ready, still leading men half again his size. The day before the battle, January 25th, Murphy walked among his 40 men, veterans and terrified replacements scattered across the frozen landscape. A fragile mix of men who had seen too much and boys who had seen nothing at all. He moved quietly among them, offering brief words of encouragement to the scared replacements, sharing cigarettes from his dwindling supply with the veterans, checking defensive positions with a critical eye honed by 2 years of survival, adjusting fields of fire, ensuring ammunition was properly distributed, making sure every man knew the rally point if things went bad. But even as he talked and listened, part of his mind stayed alert, constantly aware of every sound, every movement in the surrounding woods. The crack of a branch. The flutter of birds taking flight. The subtle changes in wind direction. He knew the Germans were massing somewhere out there in the forest. Knew what dawn would bring. You could feel it in the air. That electric tension before violence erupts. Like the moment before a Texas thunderstorm when the air goes still. That night, Murphy did not sleep. He could not. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant letting his guard down. Instead, he sat in the darkness, rifle laid across his lap, eyes scanning the tree line constantly, mind running through scenarios and contingencies. Where would they come from? How many? What would he do when they did? Waiting. Dawn broke gray and bitterly cold on January 26th, temperature well below freezing, breath visible in the air, ice crystals forming on metal, and the forest moved. The morning air hung heavy with frost and dread. Snow crunched under boots as Murphy made one final check of the positions. 40 soldiers spread thin across an impossible front. Maybe half were veterans who had survived this long through skill and luck. The rest barely out of basic training. Boys who should have been in high school. Fear carved deep into every face he passed. The replacements trying to hide it, failing. The veterans knowing better than to pretend. He moved among them silently, watching, listening, calculating odds he did not like. He knew what was coming. Every combat instinct he possessed screamed warning. Every lesson learned in blood across 2 years of war told him this would be the most dangerous day of his life. By 0930 hours, the forest erupted into violence. Artillery shells screamed overhead, arriving with deadly precision. Trees exploded into splinters, centuries-old oaks shattered like kindling. Earth erupted in massive geysers of frozen dirt and snow. Shrapnel whined through the air, seeking flesh. Men dove desperately into foxholes, pressing gloved hands hard against helmets, praying to gods they had forgotten in peacetime, promising bargains they would never keep. Murphy remained above ground, standing exposed, eyes scanning the tree line with intense focus. He read the pattern of the barrage like a language. Each burst of enemy fire, each tremor in the snow, pieces of a puzzle he solved in real time. This was preparatory fire, designed to soften defenses and kill exposed soldiers. Infantry would follow within minutes. Armor, too, if the Germans were being thorough. And they usually were. The barrage lasted exactly 12 minutes, though each one stretched into something approaching eternity. Then it stopped. Silence. Absolute and terrifying. The kind of silence that comes before slaughter. Then gray shapes emerged from the distant tree line, hundreds of German infantry advancing in practiced skirmish formation, spread wide, moving with the confidence of professional soldiers who had done this 100 times before. Behind them, the unmistakable sound of armor. Tanks rumbling forward like steel predators. Mark IV tanks and Panthers, their main guns traversing slowly, hunting for targets. Commanders scanning from open hatches. Murphy's tactical mind raced through the calculations. Company B had 40 men, most already shaken by the artillery barrage. Some wounded. All terrified. The Germans were bringing at least 250 infantry, maybe 300, plus 6 tanks, plus supporting weapons teams with machine guns and mortars, plus reserves waiting in the forest. The math was simple and brutal. A massacre was coming. His men would be overrun in minutes. Murphy signaled his radio operator, Corporal Latty Tipton. Ordered artillery support with coordinates danger close. The shells would land close enough to kill Americans as easily as Germans. It was desperate. It was necessary. It was all they had. Then Murphy made a decision that defied every military manual, every tactical doctrine, every survival instinct. He climbed atop the burning M10 tank destroyer. The vehicle had been hit by German artillery minutes earlier, flames spreading across its hull, metal glowing with heat, ammunition cooking off inside with sharp cracks and pops. A death trap. Something any sane soldier would run from. Murphy grasped the 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun mounted on top. The metal was almost too hot to touch even through gloves. Flames licked at the edges of his vision, smoke choking. Below him, inside the tank, ammunition continued to detonate randomly, each explosion shaking the vehicle, each one threatening to set off the main ammunition store. One man, one weapon, one impossible chance to hold an entire German company at bay. The gun roared to life. Tracers streaked through the winter air in bright arcs, cutting down advancing German soldiers with brutal efficiency. The entire formation faltered, shock rippling through their ranks like a wave. This was not supposed to happen. Intelligence said the American position was weak, undermanned, ripe for destruction. Officers shouted desperately, trying to rally their men forward, but confusion was already spreading faster than courage. Infantry scattered toward whatever cover they could find. Trees, ditches, abandoned vehicles. The tanks, suddenly cut off from their supporting infantry, slowed their advance, moving more cautiously now. Commanders realizing something was very wrong. The field that moments ago seemed destined to become an American graveyard was transforming into a killing zone for the attackers. Murphy called in artillery coordinates, his voice eerily calm over the radio despite the chaos surrounding him. Each shell landed with devastating accuracy, walking forward across the field as if guided by his personal will alone. Every impact shattered German cohesion, sent bodies flying, stunned survivors, slowed the advance to a crawl. A German tank, its gun traversing directly toward Murphy's position, fired. The shell missed by perhaps 3 meters, close enough to feel the heat of its passage. The concussion wave lifted him off his feet, slamming him hard against the machine gun. But somehow he stayed upright, hands finding the grips again by pure instinct, continuing to fire at the infantry following behind the tank. Time lost all meaning. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes compressed into heartbeats. The rhythm of battle became Murphy's entire world. Fire, reload, adjust aim, call artillery, sweep the field, fire again. A second wave of Germans appeared from the forest. Fresh troops who had been held in reserve, thinking the first assault had already broken through. They surged forward with renewed confidence. Murphy did not hesitate. Every movement economical, precise. Motion refined by months of continuous combat. Every burst of fire, every minute adjustment of aim, brought fresh chaos to the enemy ranks. The German tanks, now dangerously exposed without infantry protection, began taking hits from American artillery. Tracks destroyed, engines smoking, crews bailing out running for cover. The armored spearhead that was supposed to punch through the American line had stalled completely. And still Murphy remained, unmoving, relentless. The heat from the burning tank seared through his boots, melting the rubber soles, burning his feet. Small arms ammunition continued exploding randomly all around him. Shrapnel whining past his head. The metal beneath him groaned and buckled, threatening to explode catastrophically at any moment. Yet he stayed, firing, adjusting, calling in more artillery, refusing to yield even 1 inch of ground. After nearly an hour of continuous engagement, though Murphy would later say he lost all sense of time, the German attack finally broke. Officers screamed retreat orders. Soldiers fled back toward the forest, abandoning equipment, dragging wounded when they could, leaving the dead where they fell. The field emptied of attackers, leaving behind only the carnage of a failed offensive. Murphy finally lowered his weapon. His hands badly burned from the superheated metal. Blood soaked his right leg from shrapnel wounds he had not even noticed receiving. His ears rang with a sound that would never completely fade. The tank destroyer shuddered one final time, then detonated in a massive fireball, debris shooting hundreds of feet into the winter sky. Medics reached Murphy seconds later, physically dragging him away from the wreckage. Officers arrived, conducting counts, confirming what seemed impossible. 53 German soldiers confirmed killed in action. Dozens more wounded and captured. 6 tanks destroyed or disabled, beyond repair. An entire German company, well over 200 men, neutralized by a single American soldier, 20 years old, 5'5", barely over 100 pounds. The battlefield fell eerily silent. Smoke drifted across churned snow. Murphy was alive, but barely. Officers approached, visibly stunned. One man had held the line. Murphy did not feel like a hero. He felt exhausted, haunted by faces he could not save. But he had done his duty, protected his men. News spread through Allied ranks with astonishing speed. Reports described a lone figure holding a company at bay. Generals read the reports twice, thinking there must be errors. The story became legend. Murphy received the Medal of Honor. Every other major combat decoration followed. He became the most decorated American soldier of World War II. 33 awards and medals. Hollywood noticed. After the war, Murphy appeared in over 40 films. Audiences saw courage on screen. But the screen could never show the real cost. For Murphy, medals and fame were hollow. Nightmares followed him home. Faces haunted his sleep. Explosions rang in his ears years later. He would wake gasping, reaching for weapons that were not there. This was before PTSD had a name. Murphy struggled in civilian life. Jobs failed. His marriage collapsed. But Murphy spoke publicly about invisible wounds. He testified before Congress, admitted he struggled with rage and anxiety. Veterans listened. They realized they were not alone. Murphy's voice saved lives. Audie Murphy died May 28, 1971, in a plane crash. He was 45 years old. The nation mourned. Arlington National Cemetery became his final resting place. His grave is the second most visited site. People still come. Veterans, families, students, but the true measure of Murphy's life was not in medals. It was measured in choices made under fire. On January 26, 1945, in Holtzwihr, France, a man barely bigger than a boy climbed atop a burning tank destroyer. Alone, he faced an entire German company. For 1 hour, he became an army unto himself. Not for glory, but because 40 soldiers needed someone to stand between them and death. Because someone had to hold the line. And that is the truest definition of heroism. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Because sometimes, it only takes one person to change the course of history. And on that frozen morning, that person was a skinny kid from Texas, who became a legend because he refused to let his brothers down.